Is it weird to remember a level because of its optional objectives and not because of its main one? Hmm. I feel like most levels in the game have something in them that causes players to remember it, whether it be the objective itself, a specific zone or area, maybe an enemy being introduced for the very first time. There are plenty of things that can cause a level to become memorable. For me, though, I guess the reason I remember this level in particular is just simply because the secondary is a reactor sequence. And I've seen a fair amount of people struggle with this one since it is the first reactor of the rundown, so let's talk some game plans. Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to the alternate R4B1 level guide. Just like always, we're starting off with your loadout, and this time around I recommend you bring with you a biotracker, a mine deployer, and 2 burst sentries. The reason I recommend the biotracker is because it's a great tool, in my honest opinion. Information is very key in this game, and in this level in particular, there's a lot of infectious fog in some of these zones, as well as a few zones are very dark. So being able to just tag enemies or give callouts to our teammates to let them know where enemies are sleeping at can make things a little bit easier to deal with. When it comes to the mine deployer, I recommend this because there are a few alarm doors in this level, and for every single one of them, the mine deployer can come in handy. That, and there are a few blood doors in this level, especially if you go for the optional objective, so having a mine or 2 for those blood doors to just blow up most, if not every single one of the enemies instantly, will make it so we have to shoot a whole lot less, which means there isn't as much of a risk of us losing so much HP. And last but not least, when it comes to burst sentries, I'm being a bit specific with them as we are dealing with a reactor in this level if we go for the secondary objective. And while sentries in general are best for reactors, I feel like the bursts are better for this one as you're going to be fighting mostly at mid-range combat, and the burst sentries are the most ideal ones for that. Sniper sentries aren't bad, but they are a bit if you don't have biotracker symbiosis or you're not fighting a ton of giants, which for the most part we're just fighting regular strikers and shooters. And while shotgun sentries can be quite nice if positioned properly, I feel like positioning them in this level is a little bit awkward, which is why I'm not recommending them. And auto sentries, while pretty decent, they're more meant for staggering, not killing, and we want something that can actually kill off the enemies. The only other thing to really mention about your loadout, I suppose, is the fact that if you are doing a main objective only run, you are able to swap one of the sentries out for a C-foam launcher, as a mine C-foam combo can actually help out quite a bit more for some of these alarm doors than a mine double sentry loadout. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to distribute 3 power cells into specific generators, and these generators will always be located inside zone 51, 53, and 54. And you and your teammates are going to be starting off inside zone 51. And in here, there's actually a pretty fair amount of stuff to mention, so if you're the forgetful type, you might want to write some of these down. So the 3 power cells that you need for your main objective will be in the cargo dropped with you. However, there's actually a 4th power cell that will spawn somewhere randomly inside zone 51. Which I do recommend you take this, as even though you do not need it for the main objective, you will either need it for the secondary objective if you're going for it, or you can use it for an optional resource zone later on if you're doing a main objective only run. There's also going to be 2 color keycards, which you technically only need the one that gets you to zone 53, but if you happen to find the other one, you might as well pick it up. Who knows, maybe you take a slight detour just to get some more resources. There's going to be your very first bulkhead key, which you're going to need that. There will be the bulkhead door control and doors to the main and secondary objectives. There will be a fog turbine, which you're definitely going to want this for the second half of the main objective. Your first generator will be located somewhere inside here, like I mentioned, so keep an eye out for it, and once you find it, plug a power cell into it. And then the last thing to take note of is that most of the enemies sleeping inside the zone are going to be giant strikers. So either get ready to do a lot of coordinated takedowns with melee to get rid of them stealthily, or if you have somebody with a burst cannon or sniper or maybe even a choke mod shotgun, you could go guns loud. Just keep in mind that every single time you decide to shoot them, that's more ammunition you're using up now and less you're going to have later on. So now that we mentioned all of those things inside the zone, really what you're just going to want to do is go throughout it, deal with the enemies, grab resources, keep an eye out for every single one of those collectibles, keep an eye out for the power cell and that first generator and plug it in once you find it. And then once you have the color keycard you need for the security door to zone 53, which is found towards the beginning of the zone on the western side, go over to it, plug your keycard in and do the full team scan, and that'll give you access to that zone. Inside zone 53, your second generator should always spawn in there. I think it was meant to also have a chance of spawning in zone 52, which is found later on in the level, but as far as I can tell, it never can, so I'm going under the assumption that zone 53 will always have your second generator, but maybe just double check when you start off the level just in case. There is a terminal in the second room to the left, so pretty easy to grab that. But just go throughout zone 53, clear out the enemies, or just sneak your way through. It's a pretty dark zone with a fair amount of giants and spitters all over the walls, so maybe it's just best to sneak in, plug it in, and then leave. And then once you take care of that and you have the power cells in the first and the second generator, you then have a choice to make. Because the only thing really left to do is plug your bulkhead key into the door control, which will give you the scan to the main and the secondary objective. So if you're somebody who's only interested in the main objective portion of this guide and you don't care about watching secondary, jump to the timestamp that you see on screen, and there we will talk about zone 54 and how to continue on with the rest of the level. Everybody else though, we're going to do the secondary scan and go over to the bulkhead door to zone 220 and continue on with that objective. Upon entering into zone 220, you'll see that your secondary objective is to find the reactor and make sure it's fully up and operational before you leave. And that reactor is always going to be located inside zone 221. Now, zone 220 itself doesn't really have a whole lot to it, just a few enemies, some resources, and then a generator that you need to plug a power cell into in order to access the security door to zone 221. So if you haven't already gone back and grabbed that fourth power cell, make sure you go back or just grab any of the power cells really and bring it in with you and plug into the generator so you have access to that door. Then you can do the full team scan tied to the security door to zone 221 and head into there. Inside there are going to be plenty of resources, just like you can typically expect from a reactor. There will be a scout as well as a few other enemies you're going to have to deal with first though, and in the middle of the room will be your reactor terminal. So go throughout here, deal with the enemies, grab resources and resupply and whatnot, and then when you're ready, go to the reactor terminal, put in the startup command, which will initiate the full team scan, and once you finish the scan, the reactor sequence will be initiated. This reactor sequence is going to have a total of 5 different waves, which means 5 different codes you're going to need to collect. And the only code that is given to you for free is the very first one. The other 4, you're going to have to go into other zones in order to find out what they are. So first of all, before we talk about all the other zones and where you have to go, let's talk about what type of enemies you can expect to see and where you should be ideally defending, starting off with your defense position. There's a few different ways you could handle this reactor. I know some people like to move throughout it as they open up new zones, but I would just recommend go into zone 220 like you can see my team doing, set up your sentries facing towards the bulkhead door, or maybe just one of them to start off with, and just hold out here. Because if you do decide to go further back into the zone, sure, you are getting closer to the areas you have to head into, which means you could potentially get to your reactor codes faster, but this method is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Because yeah, like I said, you're getting to things faster, but the enemies are going to take longer to get to you potentially, which means you're going to be defending for a whole lot longer even after the next zone has unlocked. In my main run through this level, I had to defend for an extra 2 or even 3 minutes, I think, against reactor enemies, even though the time had already ticked over, because the enemies just took so long to get to me that the spawns just piled up, and because all those things are left in reserve and they will come after you at some point, they came after me while I was trying to get the next code. So defending out in zone 220 makes it so you don't really have to worry about this, as the enemies are spawning pretty close to you and they should arrive without too much delay. The only real downside, I suppose, to defending inside zone 220 is that later on in the reactor, there is a chance that some of the later waves could spawn from behind you, but all you really need to do to counter this is just have one of your sentries facing in towards the reactor room, and then the person with the biotracker, just keep your head on a swivel. If you hear that sentry from behind you activate, or maybe the biotracker person hears a wave from behind them and they can start tagging them, just have 1 or 2 people quickly rush over to the security door into the reactor room and just deal with the enemies who are coming from that direction. As long as you're just taking care of enemies fairly quickly, you shouldn't really have to worry about waves hitting you from both directions at the same time and putting you into a pincer formation. As for the type of enemies that you can expect to see, waves 1 through 4 are pretty much the exact same. You're just going to see regular strikers and shooters, as well as the occasional giant striker here and there. The further you get into it, the more often you'll probably see those giants. Then wave 5 will be the same with the smalls and the giant strikers. The only unique thing really about it would be that there will be a few hybrids throughout that wave. So keep an eye out for them, as they can do a lot of damage to your team pretty quickly if you don't deal with them before they have the chance to pepper you down. So now that you know where you're defending and what type of enemies to expect, let's just quickly talk about every single one of the zones, what's inside of them, and where you're going to be going for each and every single one of your codes. As I mentioned earlier, the very first reactor code is given to you for free. So defend against the first wave of enemies, put that code in, and then defend against the second wave. Once the second wave has been dealt with, the security door to the east to zones 222 will unlock. And the terminal in there is literally straight to the right of you as you enter into the room. So one person can hop onto the terminal to figure out what the code is, while the other 3 people just clear out the enemies throughout the zone and grab those resources. Once you're done, you head back and you deal with the third wave. Once the third wave has been dealt with, the security door to zone 223 is going to unlock. Zone 223's terminals are both found in the second room to the left of you, so just enter into the first room, deal with anything in there, go to the left, and then just look out that big room for the 2 terminals, and then just spend any extra time like you typically would, dealing with the rest of the enemies in the zone, opening up doors, grabbing resources, and whatnot. Then once you're done in here, head back to the reactor terminal, put the code in, and you can defend against the 4th wave. After the 4th wave has been taken care of, the security door to zone 225 is going to unlock. So backtrack a little bit, go to that security door, but before you can open it up, you're going to have to deal with the blood door. So I would recommend that you place 1 or 2 mines on it, and then just make sure there are no reactor enemies still coming after you, that way you don't get pincered. And once you're in the clear, open up the door, deal with those enemies, and then get ready to deal with any of the enemies that might have been sleeping inside the first room of 225, as they are not going to be blowing up to those mines. Once you've taken care of everything, you can head into the zone. The terminals are a bit spread out, but as you can see with the map, which I should be showing sometime around right here, you can see where the terminals are located at. So go throughout the zone, open up doors again, grab resources, and deal with enemies. Once you know what your code is and you have all the resources from in here, head back to the reactor, put your 4th code in, and this will move you on to the 5th and final wave. And once you have finished defending against the 5th wave, you're going to be given a lot of time to get this code, as your 5th and final code will be on a terminal located inside zone 227. And that is the security door found to the northern end of the reactor room itself. However, in order to open up that security door, we need a color keycard, which is always going to spawn either in zone 224 or 226. So ideally, before this point, figure out what key you need and query it, that way you know which one of those 2 zones you have to head into. Zone 224 is found to the eastern side of zone 223, and zone 226 is found to the eastern zone of 225. Now, both of these security doors have class 3 cluster alarms tied to them, so let's take a look at some map overlays. As you can see with the map overlay, if you're heading into zone 224, there are 2 different locations enemies can spawn from and a few different doors they could take to get into your room. So I recommend that all 4 of these doors, just simply shut them, and then the 2 doors that lead directly into your room, you can mine these, and this door in particular, you could C-foam as well if you have a C-foam grenade or 2, as there's a very high chance that they will go through this door to get into your room. If you and your team are heading into zone 226 down to the south though, your map overlay is going to look like this. Pretty simple, there's only one location enemies can spawn from, and as long as one of these 2 doors here are kept shut, enemies should always take this door right here to get into your room. So have those eastern doors shut, and then one to your room, shut it, mine it, and if you want to, you could C-foam it, or you could just simply not, as it's not too big of a deal, and place your sentries in the room facing towards that door. Once you are ready, activate the alarm, get to work on the scans, and before you open up that security door after you finish the scans, I recommend you make sure all the enemies from the alarm have been dealt with, as zone 224 and 226 could potentially have a single scout in them, and the last thing you want to do is open the door prematurely, have an enemy or 2 sneak up from behind you, somebody panic shoots, and then that scout's in the first room and they accidentally wake it up, or they at least wake up a ton of enemies who are sleeping in there. But once all the alarm door enemies are dead, head into the zone. There will be enemies and resources inside of both of these zones, but really the only thing you want is that color keycard. So find it, and once you have it, backtrack to the reactor room, plug it into the security door to zone 227, and that will allow you to open it up. Be careful though when heading into zone 227, as this is a very small room that will have a few regular strikers and shooters in it, as well as a sleeping birther. So you can either sneak past her and get that reactor code and just relay it to your teammates who could put it into the terminal just to ensure you don't have to redo the 5th wave, or if you have a C-foam grenade or you're just skilled at the game and you're confident in your skills, just blast your way through the birther and then just have somebody hop on the terminal and get the code, and you could put the 5th and final reactor code in. Once it's in, the reactor sequence is finished and your secondary objective is completed. So at this point, the only thing really left to do is go through any of the zones you've already gone through throughout the reactor sequence to grab any resources you might have left behind or just didn't discover, and then also make sure you get your second bulkhead key from somewhere inside zone 227. Once you have everything that you want and you fully resupplied all the way, you and teammates can backtrack out of the zone, head back into zone 51, go to the door control, plug your bulkhead key in, and do the scan for the main objective. Once you do that, the security door to zone 54 is unlocked, and we can head over there and continue on with the rest of the main objective. So continuing on with the rest of the main objective, at this point you are next to the security door to zone 54, which is just going to have a full team scan tied to it, and you should have a power cell with you, a fog turbine with you, and then if you are doing just a main objective only run, you should also have a second power cell. If you did the secondary though, you should only have the one. So do the full team scan, open up the door, and head inside the zone. In here, there will be a few enemies here and there, as well as more resources. But more importantly, your third and final generator will be located towards the back end of the zone, specifically in the northeast corner. However, in order to get to it, we are going to have to go through a lot of infectious fog. So I recommend that once you get into the third room, which is mostly covered with it, just either pull the room and let the enemies come up to you, or you can sneak your way through with a fog turbine if there aren't too many enemies down there, and make your way to the northeastern corner where you'll find 3 separate generators. one of which will be unpowered, so you just plug your power cell into it, and that will complete your main objective, assuming you have already taken care of the first and the second generator. So the only thing left to do is now make your way to Zone 56, where your extraction scan will be waiting for you. But before we could go there, we have to make our way through the security door to Zone 55. And this security door is going to have a Class 3 alarm tied to it, which, as you can see with the map overlay, there's only one possible small location for enemies, and there's only a single door, specifically this one right here, that we can utilize. So shut this door, mine it, and if you have a C-foam grenade or a C-foam launcher, go on ahead and C-foam it, and then you can place your sentry or sentries in the room with you somewhere towards the middle portion of it, I guess, facing towards that door. Once you got everything set up how you want to, activate the alarm and get to work on the scans. Keep in mind, you are surrounded by infectious fog, so if you happen to find fog repellers, now might be a good time to use them. Or if you didn't find any at all, just huddle the person with the fog turbine and biotracker person, tag enemies as often as you can, that way your teammates have an easier time dealing with them. Once the alarm is finished, you could go out and pack up your sentries, and then head into Zone 55 itself. And inside Zone 55, there are a few things to take note of. First of all, most of the zone is covered in infectious fog, so you still need to bring the fog turbine with you. There will be 2 scouts patrolling about inside the zone, as well as a fair amount of sleeping enemies. And aside from the security door to Zone 56, you can actually find a security door to Zone 57. Zone 57 itself is an optional resource zone that also has a disinfect station inside of it. However, you need to plug a power cell into the nearby generator in order to open up that door. So if you are doing only a main objective run, like I mentioned earlier, you could take the 4th power cell and plug it into here and have some easy resources to grab right at the end. However, if you went for the secondary objective, you've already used up all 4 of the power cells in the level, so you physically cannot head into this zone. But once you're done with whatever that is, whether you're going in or you're not going into it, you can make your way to the northern end of Zone 55, and up there you'll be able to find the security door to Zone 56. This security door, though, not only is it a bullet door, also has a Class 4 alarm tied to it, so let's take a look at one last map overlay. As you can see, there's only one possible small location for enemies, and there are a few different doors we can utilize. So this door right here, I recommend you shut it, mine it, and C-foam it if you have the means to C-foam it. And then the 2 doors that lead into your room, this western door, leave it shut, but the eastern door, leave it open, and have both of your sentries outside facing towards the west. That way, as enemies go into that funnel point, they have to go through the line of fire of the sentries. As for you and your teammates, you can just work on the scans. What I like to do if I am doing the secondary objective is I have one person just stay out there with the sentries shooting at the enemies, while 3 people just work on the scans. Scans could go down below into the room, by the way, where the infectious fog is, so make sure you have that fog turbine with you or some fog repellers. And once you finish the alarm, just deal with all the enemies who are still left alive. Head over to the blood door, put a mine or 2 on it, and open it up, and the mines will do most of the work for you. You just have to kill any of the enemies that did survive, and once everything is dead, just walk right on into the room. The extraction scan will be at the back end of it, and this is a silent extraction, so no more enemies will come after you. So hop onto it, and once you get the scan up to 100%, you are done, and you have completed alternate R4B1. And that's all there is to it. Alternate R4B1 is the first reactor mission of the rundown, and well, it's an alright one, I suppose. It's a fairly simple reactor that doesn't stand out too much to me aside from the sleeping berther in the final zone, so there's not really a whole lot to remember it by. Playing through the level for the first time actually confused me over and over again because I kept thinking of a fairly similar level in Rundown 5 that, in my humble opinion, was a far more memorable mission than this one. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that it was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. If you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you would like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my lovely community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links that you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which, as always, I highly recommend you check it out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, well, I better prepare myself, I suppose, as the next mission is one that haunted me for a very, very long time, and hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.